Dr. Minji Park stared at the readings on her scanner and frowned. The energy signatures coming from the asteroid field made no sense. Her research ship, the New Dawn, had been tracking these strange signals for 3 days now. "Hyen, are you seeing this?" she called to her pilot. "These readings are off the charts." Hyen Kim looked up from his control panel, worry creasing his young face. "Minji, maybe we should head back. This sector is supposed to be empty, but I'm picking up massive ships on our sensors." Before Minji could answer, the entire ship shook violently. Emergency lights flashed red as alarms screamed through the corridors. Through the main viewport, a massive shadow fell across their small vessel. The ship that appeared above them was beyond anything in human records. It stretched for miles, its dark metal hull covered in sharp spikes and weapon ports. Strange symbols glowed along its sides like angry scars. "Kithara," whispered Suna Lee, the team's junior scientist. Her face had gone pale. "We're dead." Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Kithara. They were the hunters, the killers, the ones who had never lost a battle. For over 3,000 years they had ruled through fear and strength. No species had ever defeated them. Most didn't even try to fight back. The communication system crackled to life. A deep, growling voice filled the bridge. "Human vessel, you will surrender immediately. Any resistance will result in immediate destruction." Hyen's hands shook as he reached for the weapon's controls. Minji grabbed his wrist. "Don't," she said quietly. "They could destroy us without even trying. We surrender." The tractor beam pulled their ship into the massive Kithara vessel. The docking bay was enormous, filled with smaller ships that looked like they could each destroy a human city. Kithara warriors moved around the bay, and Minji got her first close look at the galaxy's most feared species. They were huge. The smallest warrior she could see was at least 10 feet tall. Most were bigger. Their bodies were covered in natural armor plates, dark and gleaming. Their hands ended in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. When they moved, it was with the fluid grace of perfect predators. The docking clamps locked onto their ship with a sound like thunder. Within minutes, the airlock was forced open. 3 Kithara warriors entered, their golden eyes scanning the human crew with cold interest. The leader pointed one massive claw at Minji. "Yo, come." Suna grabbed Minji's arm. "Don't go with them." "I don't think I have a choice," Minji replied. She followed the warriors through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. The walls were covered with weapons and what looked like trophies from 1,000 conquered worlds. They brought her to a massive chamber at the heart of the ship. The ceiling stretched high above, lost in shadows. At the center of the room stood the largest Kithara she had seen yet. Warlord Rannoch was a legend even among his own people. He stood 14 feet tall, his armor bearing the scars of countless battles. His golden eyes held the wisdom of 3 millennia and the coldness of infinite space. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. "So," he said, circling around Minji like a cat studying a mouse. "This is what a human looks like up close." Minji stood as straight as she could, trying not to show her fear. She had read every report about Kithara encounters. None of the other species had survived long enough to learn much about them. "You are much smaller than I expected," Rannoch continued. "Weaker. Slower. Your claws are pathetic. Your armor is useless. Yet your species has survived when others have fallen. Why?" "I don't know," Minji answered honestly. "Maybe you should tell me." Rannoch stopped circling. In all his long life, no prey had ever spoken to him with such calm directness. Most species begged for mercy. Others tried to fight. A few attempted to bargain. This human simply looked at him and waited. "You are not afraid," he observed. "I am terrified," Minji replied. "But fear doesn't help me understand what you want." For a long moment, Rannoch studied her in silence. His warriors watched from the shadows, confused by this unusual exchange. In their experience, conversations with prey were usually very short. "Your kind has been spreading through the galaxy for only a few hundred years," Rannoch said finally. "Other species have had millions of years to grow strong. Yet you adapt. You survive. You even thrive in places where stronger species have failed. I want to know why." Minji felt a small spark of hope. "And if I help you understand?" Rannoch's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing teeth like white daggers. "Then perhaps you will live long enough to see another day. Perhaps you will even teach me something interesting." He gestured to his warriors. "Take her to the detention level. Give her food and water. I have plans for this human." As they led her away, Minji wondered what she had gotten herself into. She was alive, which was more than most prisoners could say. But she had a feeling her real test was just beginning. The detention cell was cold and dark, but Minji had slept in worse places during her research expeditions. When the door slid open the next morning, she was ready. Warlord Rannick entered with 2 guards. In the dim light, he looked even more terrifying than before. His golden eyes studied her as she stood up calmly. "I have decided what to do with you, human," he said. "You will face a trial. If you survive, we will talk again. If you fail, you will die." "What kind of trial?" Minji asked. Rannick smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "A hunt. You will be taken to Zirian Prime, one of our training worlds. 3 of my best hunters will track you through the wilderness. You have 7 days to survive." One of the guards, a younger Kithara named Vulcan, stepped forward. "Warlord, surely this is too easy. The human will die within hours." "Perhaps," Rannick replied. "But I am curious to see how long she lasts. Take her to the transport." 2 hours later, Minji found herself standing on the surface of an alien world. Zirian Prime was a nightmare landscape of twisted trees, poisonous swamps, and strange sounds echoing through the mist. The air was thick and humid, making it hard to breathe. The transport ship lifted off, leaving her alone. Rannick's voice came through a small communication device they had given her. "The hunt begins now, human. My warriors Vulcan, Thane, and Corinne are already tracking you. They have orders not to kill you quickly. Run." Minji looked around at the hostile environment and started walking. She had no weapons, no shelter, and no food. But she did have something the Kithara didn't expect: years of studying animal behavior in dangerous places. The first thing she did was find water. A small stream ran through the forest, but she didn't drink from it right away. Instead, she watched and waited. After an hour, she saw small creatures drinking safely from one particular spot. That's where she filled her water container. Next, she needed to understand her hunters. Kithara were apex predators. They hunted by tracking their prey directly, using speed and strength to catch them. They were used to prey that ran in straight lines, hiding in obvious places. So Minji did the opposite. On the second day, she found Vulcan's tracks near the stream. The young Kithara was following her trail exactly, just as she had hoped. She spent an hour setting up her trap. When Vulcan came through the forest, following her scent, he was focused on the ground. He didn't notice the thin vine stretched across the path until it was too late. The simple tripwire sent him tumbling into a pit she had covered with branches and leaves. The pit wasn't deep enough to hurt him seriously, but it was deep enough to trap him. She had lined the bottom with thick mud from the swamp, making it impossible for him to climb out with his heavy body. "Clever little prey," Vulcan growled as she looked down at him. "But you cannot hide from us forever." "I'm not hiding," Minji replied calmly. "I'm hunting." She took his communication device and disappeared back into the forest before he could figure out how to escape. Hunter Thane was more careful. He had heard Vulcan's angry calls for help through the comm system. But Minji had been watching him too. She noticed he always stopped to rest at the same time each day, always in high places where he could see far. On the 4th day, she was waiting for him. Thane climbed onto his usual resting spot, a large rock overlooking the valley. He settled down to scan the area below. That's when he noticed the smell. It was sweet and pleasant, making him feel relaxed. Too relaxed. By the time he realized the small flowers around the rock were releasing some kind of drug into the air, he was already falling asleep. Minji had spent hours studying the local plants. The sleep flowers were harmless to humans but very effective on Kithara nervous systems. She used vines to tie the sleeping hunter to the rock and took his weapons. Corinne was the smartest of the 3. He had learned from his partner's mistakes. Instead of tracking Minji directly, he tried to predict where she would go. He set up ambushes at water sources and shelter spots. But Minji was no longer thinking like prey. She was thinking like a predator. On the 6th day, she found Corinne waiting by the stream where she usually got water. He was hidden perfectly, ready to strike when she came to drink. He waited for hours in the same position. That was his mistake. Minji had been watching him from across the stream. When she was sure he wouldn't move, she started her plan. Using Thane's hunting knife, she cut down a large dead tree upstream. The tree fell across the stream, creating a dam. The water level rose quickly. Corinne, focused on watching for his target, didn't notice until the flood reached his hiding spot. The rushing water swept him away, tumbling him downstream into a natural pool where the current trapped him against fallen logs. When Rannick's transport arrived on the 7th day, they found 3 embarrassed hunters and 1 very calm human. Vulcan was still trying to climb out of his pit. Thane was just waking up from his drugged sleep. Corinne was sitting in the pool, too proud to call for help. Minji sat on a rock nearby, braiding grass into rope. She looked up as Rannick approached. "Your trial is over," the warlord said. "You have survived." "I did more than survive," Minji replied. "I won." For the first time in his long life, Rannick found himself wondering what else this small human might be capable of. Rannick's ship arrived at the Kithra homeworld 3 days later. Even from space, Minji could see something was wrong. Large sections of the planet's surface looked gray and lifeless, like infected wounds spreading across the continents. "What happened here?" she asked as they descended through the atmosphere. "The Devourers came 6 months ago," Rannick replied grimly. "They consume everything, plants, animals, even the soil itself. Nothing we do can stop them." The landing platform was chaos. Kithra warriors ran back and forth, carrying weapons and supplies. In the distance, Minji could see the dead zones where nothing lived. The air smelled wrong, like something rotting. Commander Tejo met them at the platform. His usually perfect armor was stained and dented. "Warlord, the situation grows worse each day. The creatures have spread to the northern continent. Our plasma cannons have no effect. Even fire weapons only slow them down." "Show me," Rannick ordered. They traveled to the edge of the nearest dead zone in an armored transport. The boundary was sharp and clear, green, living forest on one side, gray wasteland on the other. The infected area looked like the surface of a dead moon. "The Devourers eat everything," Tejo explained. "They break down all organic matter and spread rapidly. We have tried every weapon in our arsenal. Nothing works." Minji knelt at the edge of the dead zone and examined the gray soil. It felt strange, almost powdery. She took out a small container and collected samples. "What do these creatures look like?" Tejo activated a holographic display. The Devourers appeared as small, worm-like creatures with metallic shells. They moved in vast swarms, consuming everything in their path. "Where did they come from?" Minji asked. "Unknown," Rannick replied. "They appeared suddenly in the southern wastelands. We believe they are a weapon created by our enemies." Minji studied the creatures in the hologram. Something about them seemed familiar. "Can I see your biological records?" "Information about your planet's original ecosystem." "Why would that matter?" Tejo demanded. "These are invaders. Parasites. They must be destroyed." "Maybe," Minji said quietly. "But first I need to understand what they really are." In the research facility, Minji spent hours studying Kithra biological records. The data painted a clear picture. For thousands of years, the Kithra had been perfect hunters. They had hunted the largest animals on their world to extinction. They had cleared vast forests for their cities. They had changed their entire planet to suit their needs. "Your records show massive ecological damage," she told Rannick. "You've been hunting your world's natural balance into extinction." "We are the dominant species," Rannick replied. "It is our right to shape our world as we choose." "But ecosystems need balance," Minji explained. "When you remove too many animals and plants, the whole system becomes unstable. Weak." She showed him her analysis of the Devourer samples. "These aren't invaders. They're native to your world. They've been sleeping underground waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For your ecosystem to collapse enough that they could wake up and try to fix it." Rannick stared at her. "You're saying these creatures are trying to help our world?" "In their own way, yes. They're breaking down the damaged ecosystem so it can rebuild itself. But they don't know when to stop. They're stuck in a cycle of destruction because there's nothing left to tell them the job is done." Tejo slammed his clawed fist on the table. "Impossible. These parasites are destroying our world." "They're trying to save it," Minji corrected. "But they need help to do it right." Over the next week, Minji worked with Kithra scientists to develop her plan. It was unlike anything they had ever considered. Instead of fighting the Devourers, they would give them what they needed to complete their natural cycle. The first step was creating seed banks, collections of native plants and animals that had been extinct for centuries. Using genetic records, they began growing the species that had once lived in balance on the Kithra homeworld. The second step was the hardest. They had to convince the Devourers to stop destroying and start rebuilding. Minji developed a chemical signal based on natural compounds that healthy ecosystems produced. They sprayed it over the dead zones from aircraft, along with the seeds and small animals they had recreated. "This is madness," Tejo muttered as they watched the first test area. "We're feeding the creatures that are destroying us." But slowly something changed. The Devourers began to respond to the chemical signals. Instead of consuming everything, they started to process the organic matter differently. They began creating rich soil instead of gray dust. The seeds began to grow in the new soil. Small animals began to survive in the treated areas. Within a month, the dead zone started showing patches of green. Incredible, whispered Dr. Salmon, the lead Kithra biologist. The devourers are becoming beneficial. They're helping the plants grow. By the end of 3 months, the dead zones were transforming into healthy ecosystems. The devourers had evolved into a new role, becoming part of the natural cycle instead of destroying it. They now worked to maintain balance instead of consuming everything. Rannoch stood with Minji on a hill overlooking one of the restored areas. Below them, forests grew where there had once been wasteland. Animals moved through the trees. The air smelled clean and alive. Your people see connections mine cannot, he said finally. We saw enemies to be destroyed. You saw a broken system to be healed. Every species has its own way of solving problems, Minji replied. Maybe that's why the galaxy needs all of us. Rannoch looked at her with something that might have been respect. Perhaps you are right, human. Perhaps you are right. News of Minji's success with the Devourers spread quickly through Kithra space. Not all of the reactions were positive. 3 weeks after the homeworld began healing, an unexpected visitor arrived at Rannoch's stronghold. Warlord Krazen commanded the largest war fleet in the outer systems. His ship was even more massive than Rannoch's, covered in weapons and battle scars. When he stepped into the Great Hall, every warrior present could feel the tension in the air. Krazen was old even by Kithra standards. His armor was black metal, polished to mirror brightness. Scars covered his arms and face, proof of countless battles. His golden eyes burned with anger as he looked at Rannoch. Brother, he said, though his voice held no warmth, I have come to discuss troubling news. Speak, Rannoch replied calmly, though his hand rested near his weapon. You have grown soft, Krazen declared loud enough for all to hear. You keep a human as a pet. You take advice from prey animals. You have forgotten what it means to be Kithra. Murmurs rippled through the assembled warriors. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked uncertain. Minji, standing near the back of the hall, felt the mood shifting dangerously. The human has proven useful, Rannoch said carefully. She solved a problem our warriors could not. By making us weak. Krazen roared. By teaching us to work with parasites instead of destroying them. This is not the Kithra way. He pointed one massive claw at Minji. Humans spread through our galaxy like a disease. They multiply rapidly. They adapt to any environment. They must be controlled before they become a threat. The humans are not our enemies, Rannoch replied. Then you have forgotten our purpose, Krazen snarled. We are the hunters. We are the strong. The weak exist to serve us or die. I challenge your leadership, Rannoch. Prove you are still worthy to command or step aside. The hall erupted in shouts and arguments. Warriors chose sides quickly. The younger ones who had seen Minji's work on the homeworld supported Rannoch. The older warriors, trained in the traditional ways, moved toward Krazen. I accept your challenge, Rannoch said, his voice cutting through the noise. What are your terms? Krazen smiled coldly. Single combat as tradition demands. But first, let me prove my point about human weakness. I propose to attack their colonies in the Centauri system. When they fall easily, all will see that I was right. No, Minji said, stepping forward. The entire hall turned to stare at her. A prey animal speaking during a formal challenge was unthinkable. The human dares to interrupt? Krazen laughed. This proves my point perfectly. I request the right of trial by combat, Minji continued, ignoring the shocked gasps around her. If humans are truly weak, then one of your champions should easily defeat me. If I win, you leave our colonies alone. The hall fell silent. No non-Kithra had ever entered their sacred combat circle. The very idea was beyond their understanding. Impossible, Krazen said. You are not worthy of our combat ring. Are you afraid? Minji asked simply. The words hit Krazen like a physical blow. No Kithra had ever been called a coward by prey. His eyes blazed with fury. Very well. I accept your foolish challenge. My champion Vorthak will face you. When you die screaming, your colonies will follow. The combat circle was prepared in the center of the hall. Vorthak stepped forward, a massive Kithra warrior covered in battle scars. He was almost as large as Krazen himself, with claws that could cut through steel armor. Minji entered the circle wearing simple clothes and carrying no weapons. She looked tiny compared to her opponent. Many of the watching warriors shook their heads sadly. This is murder, whispered Mako, a young warrior who had helped with the Devourer research. Perhaps, Rannoch replied quietly. But it is her choice. The fight began badly for Minji. Vorthak's first strike sent her flying across the circle. His claws opened deep cuts on her arms and shoulders. She rolled away from his next attack, but there was nowhere to hide in the small space. The crowd expected her to fall quickly. Instead, she kept getting up. Every time Vorthak knocked her down, she struggled back to her feet. Blood ran down her arms, but she never stopped fighting. "Stay down." Vorthak roared after his 10th strike. "Die with dignity." "No," Minji gasped, pulling herself upright again. "I won't let you hurt innocent people." Something changed in the watching crowd. Young warriors like Mako began to shift uncomfortably. They had never seen such determination from a prey species. Even some of Krasen's supporters looked troubled. Vorthak raised his claws for what should have been the killing blow. But before he could strike, Mako leaped into the circle. "Stop!" the young warrior shouted. "This is wrong." "What are you doing?" Krasen demanded. "She fights with honor," Mako replied. "Real honor. She would die to protect others. How is that weakness?" More warriors began moving toward the circle. First a few, then dozens. They surrounded Minji, facing outward toward Vorthak and Krasen. "Stand aside," Krasen ordered. "This does not concern you." "It does," said Commander Teho, joining the protective circle. "She saved our world. We will not let her die for our politics." For the first time in Kithra history, warriors were protecting a member of another species. The old traditions crumbled in that moment, replaced by something new and unexpected, respect earned through courage rather than strength. Krasen stared in disbelief as more and more of his own supporters joined the protective circle around the bleeding human. The standoff in the combat circle lasted for several tense minutes. Krasen's supporters faced off against the warriors protecting Minji, but no one wanted to start a civil war. Finally, an emergency alarm broke the silence. "Critical system failure," shouted a technician running into the hall. "The main reactor is overloading. All ships in the docking bay are at risk." The massive space station shuddered violently. Emergency lights flashed throughout the corridors. Through the hall's great windows, they could see human and Kithra ships docked together, their crews working desperately to evacuate. "How long do we have?" Rannick demanded. 30 minutes, maybe less," the technician replied. "The containment field is failing. When it collapses, the explosion will destroy everything within 50 kilometers. "Can it be repaired?" asked Commander Teho. "Someone would have to go into the reactor core manually," the technician explained. "But the radiation levels are already lethal. No one could survive long enough to complete the repairs." Krasen seized the moment. "See how your human friends abandon us in danger," he shouted. "They will flee like the cowards they are." But Minji was already moving toward the exit. "Where are the repair tools?" she asked the technician. "What?" Rannick caught her arm. "You cannot be serious." "Someone has to do it," Minji said calmly. "The radiation will kill whoever goes in there, but maybe I can fix it before I die. At least some people will survive." "You are injured," Mako protested. "You can barely walk." "That doesn't matter now." Minji looked around the hall at the assembled warriors. "How many people are on this station? Humans and Kithra together?" "Nearly 800, Teho replied quietly. "Then 800 people get to live," she said. "That's worth one life." The station shook again, more violently than before. In the distance, they could hear the sound of ships launching as crews evacuated. But not everyone could escape in time. "I forbid it," Rannick said. "You are under my protection." "No," Minji replied gently. "I'm not your prisoner anymore. I'm not your pet or your research subject. I'm just someone who can help." She pulled free from his grip and headed for the reactor section. Behind her, the great hall erupted in arguments. Some warriors shouted that she should be stopped. Others demanded that a Kithra volunteer instead. But no one followed her. The reactor core was a nightmare of heat, light, and deadly radiation. Minji's detection device screamed warnings as she approached the main console. She could already feel the radiation burning through her body. Her hands shook as she opened the repair kit. The instructions were in Kithra symbols, but she had learned enough to understand them. The process was simple in theory: realign the containment field generators and restart the cooling systems. In practice, it meant working for 20 minutes in radiation that would kill her in 5. Through her communication device, she could hear voices from the command center. Rannick was arguing with Krasen. Mako was trying to organize an evacuation. Human ship captains were coordinating rescue efforts. "Minji," came Rannick's voice through the static. "You still have time to get out. Others can finish the work." No, she replied, her voice already weak from radiation sickness. I'm the only one small enough to reach the damaged components. And I'm already dying anyway. She worked steadily, ignoring the pain that shot through her body. Her vision began to blur, but her hands kept moving. First the containment field, then the cooling systems. Each task took her closer to death, but each task brought everyone else closer to safety. Containment field is stable, she reported. Starting cooling system repairs now. The station stopped shaking. Through the reactor room's small window, she could see ships still docked at the station, their crews safe for now. Both human and Kithra vessels working together to help with the emergency. Cooling system is online, she whispered into her comm device. Reactor should be stable now. Someone needs to check the readings from the command center. Confirmed, came Tejo's voice. All systems are stable. The crisis is over. Minji collapsed against the reactor console. She had done it. Everyone would live. The thought made her smile despite the pain. When the rescue team reached her 20 minutes later, she was barely conscious. They carried her to the medical bay, but there was nothing anyone could do. The radiation had damaged too much. Rannick stayed by her bed as she died. In her final moments, she squeezed his massive hand with her small one. Why? He asked quietly. Why sacrifice yourself for us? We were your enemies. Because that's what people do, she whispered. All people. Human, Kithra, anyone worth saving. We take care of each other. She died peacefully, surrounded by both human and Kithra friends. At her funeral, something unprecedented happened. Before the combined crews of 800 souls, the galaxy's greatest predator slowly lowered himself to one knee. His proud head bowed in recognition. Today I learned, Rannick said quietly, that the strongest hunters are not always the strongest beings. The assembled warriors, human and Kithra alike, knelt beside their warlord. For the first time in galactic history, strength was measured not by the ability to kill, but by the willingness to die for others.